Doctors of Reddit, what patient made you go how the duck are you even alive? Belligerent guy comes in a wheelchair. He doesn't want to be here. Has ducking fine. The party was good. Ems ducked his evening up. Ems brought him in from a bush party. The guy had a chainsaw stuck in his thigh and shin. Literally jammed in his leg. And severe burns after falling into the bonfire on half his body. Guy was hammered. Didn't seem bothered by the fact he was severely burned or had a chainsaw in his leg. He ended up losing the leg below his knee and got a nasty infection from the burn. But still, if his leg wasn't completely ducked, I'm convinced he'd have gotten up and tried to fight people. He must be an Aussie, and I can tell you, almost 100% certain, if he is Australian, he was drinking Bundy rum. That shit makes you do funny things. I still drink it though. I was on home call for her in a small town. Got a call from the nurse one night and she was like, Ems brought someone in here and they think she might be dead. I was like, well, is she? She was like, I don't know. This was a seasoned RN, by the way, so I was like, well, guess we are treating this as a code blue kind of situation. So without any further information, I jump into my car and rush over to the hospital. Once I got there, I realized why the triage nurse was so confused. In the trauma bay lay what appeared to be skeletonized remains under a blanket. The person felt warm to touch, so I opened their eye, and a yellow, wrinkled, shrunken eyeball stared at me and then suddenly moved. Potassium of 1. For those familiar with lab values, the backstory was extreme self-neglect / depression combined with carriage over neglect. Weighed in at 67 pounds at a height of about 5 feet 5. We actually resuscitated her, very aggressively, and unbelievably. After about 8 liters of fluid, she started speaking a word or two at a time and recognized her daughter. For those like me who are curious, potassium levels of 3, 6 to 5. 2 is normal. Anything less than 2, 5 is life-threatening. Seems like a relatively wide range for normal, but it doesn't take much to get into deadly territory. That's kind of scary. I'm going to go eat a banana. I had to have 4 bags of potassium pumped into my veins once in Resus. Was the most painful thing I can remember. They tied my hands down to stop me pulling the 4th tubes out. They also kept trying to get me to drink it. It's gross. My father's doctor couldn't believe her. He didn't need to amputate his feet and he was still alive. Dad had brittle diabetes. His pancreas would kick in and out due to a congenital deformity. At 82, he had significant heart issues, including angina, enlarged heart and clogged arteries. One day, his feet went black, not just bluish or grey, black as charcoal. Rushed to emergency. We were told they would amputate, but to say our goodbyes, Dad refused surgery, said he'd rather be dead. At his age, hours later, his feet were pink. We took him home that morning. Doctor actually apologized for upsetting us, but said he'd never seen anything like it. Wow. The dude just straight up refused to die, and his body was like, alright, geez, you win. Apostrophe. Queen Elizabeth has a challenger. Patient here. When I was 2 I was being treated for asthma due to wheezing, labored breathing, etc. One night it got exceptionally bad, so my mom took me to the ER. They put me face down to do a cord scan. This was 1990, and when they were done, they turned me back over, and I was blue. Had stopped breathing. Court revealed a volleyball-size mass in my chest. Emergency surgery revealed what was supposed to be my twin. It kept growing inside my ribcage and finally had nowhere to go in my toddler body, so it cut off my airway. It had fingernails, hair, appendages. Everything but major organs. I made a full recovery. I'm a healthy 31-year-old now. Zero asthma. Only remnant of that night is a scar that goes from the center of my chest to the center of my back. Update. Definitely didn't expect this to blow up. Damn. Thanks for my first gold. This was a teratoma, so it was never a viable human. Edited the post to show that I'm the healthy 31-year-old. Lol, anybody that quoted White Scroot is my hero. What? The duck? Yep. It's called fetus in fetu. Veterinarian. Dog hit by a train. It severed the dog's leg and the dog carried its own leg home. Owner brought dog and leg to the Edit. Leg could not be reattached due to significant damage to limb. Dogs do great as tripods though. That dog must have been crazy from pain. That's amazing. Did it survive? I'm assuming that the leg wasn't reattached and now there's a three-legged dog being absolutely doted on somewhere in the world. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. Currently in residency. But this was a patient I saw in medical school. This one has more to do with a patient's past medical history instead of anything acute. Had one patient in one of my internal medicine rotations who was admitted for hip surgery who was one of the nicest, sweetest people I've ever met. Her surgery was pretty routine and there were no complications. In her past medical history, she was diagnosed with stage 4 endometrial cancer that had spread to her brain. Apparently she had undergone chemo, radiation, primary tumor resection, and surgery to remove the brain met. She remained cancer-free since that period. The fact that she had undergone that whole ordeal and appeared to be mostly healthy and was in remission from her cancer really blew my mind. Very nice. Dude. What the hell is that name? During residency, my IQ patient had to have his chest reopened less than an hour after 6-hour open heart CABG surgery. He needed 12 units of blood. His heart massage then shocked 4 times. Cardiothoracic surgeon and the IQ operating because no time to go back down to or was an illicit drug abuser and alcoholic. Nurses called him the cockroach. I checked in on him for 4 weeks. He was unresponsive every day. On week 20 we had to consult and to take maggots out of his nose. I was sure he was a goner after that. Week 3 passed. No change. Week 4. Day 24 I believe. At 6 AM. He opens his eyes. I was shocked. He has a permanent tracheostomy now, but somehow is alive. How the hell did he get maggots in his nose? Edit. Wow, I really didn't expect this many comments and upvotes. Thank you everyone. I was curious as to why the fly eggs or the small maggots weren't picked up. Surely a nurse cleaning his face at least daily would have noticed them. Unless some poor fly literally crawled all the way up there or noticed some small ones at some point, cause they start out small. Not that poster. But it assumed drug abuse. I shadowed an SLP in an IQ one day and we had to do a cognition eval on someone who had overdosed on what is chart called a variety of drugs. I forget exactly how I found this out. I think he was alert and told us, but had done so much cocaine that he didn't really have a soft palate anymore. It had just dissolved away or something. I'm really not acquainted enough with drugs to say for sure. Edit. Remembered it wasn't a cog eval. He had been intubated and we were doing a speech/swallowing screen. Edit 2. People are asking how this means maggots. I can only assume that perhaps when he was asleep or passed out one time a fly either flew in or smelled the dead tissue and figured its children would love to eat that. Yeah, I'd have to ask the top commenter to be sure, though. I had a patient who was literally cut in half at the pelvis after a car hit him and pinned him to a telephone pole. Paramedics carried his legs in separately. He was wide awake and talking to me as we quickly put in a central line, and he got all the bleeders ligated by like 5 different surgeons. He declined pain meds repeatedly. What a legend. He was in the OR 5 minutes later. Luckily this was at a major academic center with an exceptional trauma surgery team. Apparently the guy lived. Not sure what his quality of life was after, but pretty crazy. This might be a silly question, but did his legs get stitched back on? No, the legs never got reattached. They stayed in the trauma bay on a separate gurney. A couple pictures of me before and after brain surgeries were on the front page around this time last year. The mortality rate for acute sideral hematomas is 50-90% of those who live. Approximately 20-30% regain any brain functioning. Due to the sideral hematoma, the bleeding in my skull was so severe that I also had cranial herniation. My brain tilted 5 millimeters, causing my brainstem to compress into my spinal cord. That I not only lived, but woke up and recovered well enough to go back to work / get married / travel the world / return to baseline physically is a straight up medical miracle. I'm still in touch with the neurosurgeon who was on call at the hospital that day, and he says the same thing. Wow. I went back through your posts and I'm all choked up. That's amazing. I'm sorry you had to endure something so horrible, but so thankful you could overcome it. Congratulations on your recovery and marriage. I hope things will continue to be positive. Thank you. Let's hope COVID subsides in time for an end of year wedding. My hope is that anyone who needs a little hope might get it from my story. Lady in her mid-30s was in the clinic for a 1-week follow-up post-foot amputation, diabetes. She was admitted straight from the clinic because her blood glucose was 600 mg/dl. Normal is 80 to 120, and the wound was severely infected. We used super concentrated doses of insulin to bring it back to the 200s. She was on strict diet restrictions and we couldn't figure out how it wouldn't drop any lower than 250. Turns out her kids, teens, had been sneaking giant 64-ounce sodas and candy bars into the hospital, literally 1 week after we chopped her foot off because of uncontrolled diabetes. Not exactly a case of how the duck did you survive that trauma / disease, but how the duck do you even function on your own. I know a guy who keeps telling me that he never takes insulin and drinks 40 ounces of dew a day and his diabetes hasn't caused him any problems yet. Same guy also had his foot amputated a few inches above the ankle a year ago. I don't understand. Does he think the amputation was for frostbite? I work in trauma and once had a guy fall off a roof. He said he remembered hitting the bars on the scaffolding on the way down. We originally thought he'd fractured his femur, but nope, just a small hematoma. He was in bed next to a man who had broken his ribs and had a small C-spine fracture when he fell forward picking up his keys. A friend of mine had to get his entire leg amputated because he slipped off the bottom step of a ladder and bent his knee backwards. It apparently pinched some type of main blood vessel as his entire leg eventually got necrosis. When they had him in the hospital, they tried to helicopter him to some other hospital, but there were high winds, so they had him sitting there with the necrosis spreading over a stupid 1-foot slip. Edit. To basically answer everyone's question, it just happened 3 weeks ago. I visit him, and we both kinda look where his leg used to be and just think, what the duck? He is taking it pretty well, but we kinda nervous laugh at how bizarre it was. I was right next to him, and his knee didn't even bend back that far. No broken bone or anything. But he was in pain, so I forced him to the hospital when all he wanted to do was ice it. It's crazy how strong but delicate the body is at the same time. He's a physical therapist, and was always in top health. He was the exact weight he should have been. While he was in surgery, the doctors told his family that he had the possibility of not making it. When they called me, I couldn't comprehend how on earth that could be possible. Then they said he would live, but the entire leg had to go. But like I said, he is taking it fairly well. Another thing to stress about. Awesome. As a med student on my emergency rotation, I had a guy brought in who had fallen off a 7th or 8th floor balcony and landed on his head. Essentially door, and we couldn't get a blood pressure when he got to the hospital. As a student, my job was to basically stand to the side and squeeze the bajillion bags of blood that went into this dude. His cervical spine was essentially dust on the initial cord scan we got. I figured he probably wouldn't have made it, but about a month later I'm now on my IQ rotation and I see this guy awake and conscious. Pretty crazy. Any update on his condition? Crazy. When I saw him, we were basically seeing how much function he would get back, but he was going to be in the IQ for a long time. From what I can remember, he couldn't really move either leg, but he actually had some movement in his arms/hands, so they weren't sure how much he was going to get back by the time he left the hospital. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more daily Reddit videos.